Hey, welcome to Gradtalk MBA by Magoosh. This is where we chat with real admissions officers, MBA students, and alums, getting the full scoop on getting in and getting through business school, among other things. Do you want to get into a top program to succeed? What is business school really like? Hear about all of this and more in Gradtalk MBA.
So this is going to be the undergraduate admissions counselor in me, and I'm going to say fact.
All right, we got a fact.
So I will say fact for this one, because you want to utilize all of the real estate possible in the applicant and tell you how many stories we've heard of students being in a loud environment, being distracted in an interview. So being able to allocate, 30 minutes of just quiet time.
Thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today. For those of you who are new here, I am Pejman Pormalezi. I am a co-founder at Magoosh. We are an edtech company that levels the playing field by providing high quality and affordable test prep and admission support. The primary purpose of this podcast is to demystify the MBA application process. And, I myself have an MBA. I went to Haas Berkeley, so know a few of these things firsthand, but it's been quite a while since I got my MBA. So I'm excited to have Terrell Williams here with us today, someone who's very up to speed with the MBA process as an admissions director at MIT. Just want to welcome you to the show, Terrell, and maybe we can just kick it off with just learning a bit about yourself, your role, and kind of what got you into the admission space.
Yeah, thank you for that. I serve as the Associate Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Office of Admissions at MIT Sloan, located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I've been in this role officially, I want to say 16 months. So I started in April of 2022 and going into my second year within the office. Prior to my current role at MIT, I worked in undergraduate admissions. So I had about 8 years of undergraduate admissions experience working at Bethune-Cookman University in Daytona Beach, Florida, as well as Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida. So moving from Florida to Massachusetts was a culture shock, but it was great for my career to be able to progress in my career and be able to cultivate relationships with, more diverse student populations as they were going into graduate school. The pivot into business school admissions actually occurred for two reasons. So my spouse was actually receiving her PhD in biology, and a compromise that will lead us to an area that will benefit us both. So that's the reasoning for me pivoting into business school. And I would say what I love most about my job is the autonomy to develop and enhance innovative strategies that align with our school mission. And I'm really looking forward to the second year and being able to hit the ground running with more implementation on how we can, you recruit more diverse populations.
That's awesome. It's awesome to hear, Terrell, your background, and then especially you're already hitting on innovation and all. And that's definitely a word that comes up for me when I think of MIT. And Sloan and business schools in general. I think they're always kind of reinventing and staying on the cutting edge. So just curious to dig in a little bit on that, maybe with the kind of the general question that people always like to ask about business school programs, which is kind of what differentiates MIT Sloan? Like, how does it stand out versus the other MBA programs, maybe in terms of culture and curriculum and these sort of things?
Yeah, great question. So I will say MIT Sloan is a mission-driven school. So everything we do comes back to our mission, which is to develop principled, innovative leaders who improve the world and to generate ideas that advance the management practice. The desire for our student population will be to make an impact in their experience, as well as being able to have a more collaborative environment. So I think the thing that differentiates us is the fact that we're a mission-driven school, and all of our students are, aware of that fact, but also looking in to be able to enhance our community.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm curious, like how that plays out. Like, would you say the student body is very tight knit? Is it kind of spread out across different parts of the campus, getting involved in other departments? Just curious to bring it to life a bit in terms of the student experience.
Yeah, so our program for the MBA is roughly 410 students. That's combined with our master's in master's in engineering with one of our 7 disciplines, which is the Leadership for Global Operation. So about 410 is the number for our program. So it's relatively small knit. So within that 2-year time frame, you will get to know most of your classmates, if not all of your classmates. And it's highly flexible and customizable. So students are able to not only take courses at MIT Sloan, but also courses across the MIT ecosystem, but also being able to cross collaborate with Harvard as well. So being able to take up to 3 classes there. So that's something that we like to promote, is being able to customize your experience and being able to just kind of have that collaborative environment and being able to kind of dive into, things that you're really interested in.
Got you. Is there certain industries or kind of areas of focus, would you say, for MIT Sloan, areas that people especially gravitate towards when they join the program?
Yeah, so there's a misconception, I would say, about MIT Sloan.
Yeah.
It's the fact that we are the MBA for engineers. That is a myth. So about 55% of our students are coming in from non-STEM backgrounds. So we have a very non-traditional kind of program where students are coming in from all different backgrounds. For pre-MBA, I will say the top 3 industries were consulting, finance, as well as tech. But then when they pivot from business school, there's a wide range of things that they can do that range from entrepreneurship to nonprofit to NGO. So there's a lot of students that come in and pivot. So about 85% of our students are pivoters, career pivoters.
That's
so
great.
They're not just tied to one thing, which may be engineering or maybe technology. There's a wide range of things that students can take part in post MBA.
That's awesome. Pivot is one of the harder things to pull off, and it's great that MBA programs, particularly MIT here, sets you up well for that. I'm curious, you kind of already shared one thing, kind of a common misconception, but of MIT, but I'm curious, what else is kind of maybe surprising about MIT, maybe something you wouldn't see on the website that you'd want people to know about the program?
Yeah, so I will say our focus at MIT Sloan isn't on rankings, but more so on relationships. So we highlight experiences that help students visualize how great they can be within this collaborative environment, filled with support and resources. So we definitely want to make sure that students, get those connection points as they're going through the process. So we definitely encourage students to connect with current students, alumni, or if there's somebody that they feel like can help them in this process. And we definitely encourage that because we know that those relationships are going to help them through business school, but also post business school as well. So that's when I think one thing I want to focus on is the relationship aspect of MIT Sloan.
That's great. So it sounds like alumni stay pretty involved or plugged in with the program.
Yes. So that was one thing that surprised me, how connected our alumni base was. So we do have a strong relationship with our Office of External Relations, which definitely helps with, alumni participation, alumni panels, but also on campus and virtual events. So being able to have our alumni connected to the pulse of what we're doing within admissions is vital because their experience is going to be able to help drive more people to our program, but also being able to talk about, what they're doing post MBA, because there may be some connections there that some of our current students, also prospective students, can lean on, and being able to build those relationships as they're going through the process.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. I just remember that was one of the most exciting things of being in the MBA program was kind of having an excuse and kind of built-in way to reach out to, really interesting, accomplished people in really any company and industry. So I think any program that has that strong connection with alumni, that's a huge value add
Sure.
to students. So kind of turning a little, one of the things we pride ourselves at Magoosh is that we are a product and service that can be accessible for many under-resourced backgrounds. We have low price, self-serve, test prep, and admissions products. I'm curious what advice you have for folks in this kind of group as they're pursuing MBA admissions. There's so many pieces to it. There's often a lot of expense, a lot of things to learn on that front. So what are some resources or tips you share, and maybe some things you do at MIT Sloan to serve these students?
Yeah, so that was one of the first initiatives that I wanted to be able to create, is create more access for students that were coming from underrepresented backgrounds, that were socioeconomically disadvantaged. So we actually increased the number of admissions application waivers offered, ranging from MIT sponsored programs to events and conferences and fellowship programs. So being able to create that access was vital in us, driving these numbers and continuing our momentum with increasing the number of underrepresented minorities in our program. Also, in fall of 2022, we launched our Identity and Inclusion Series on campus visit program. So giving the students an opportunity to be able to come on campus, interact with current students, sit in a class, but also be able to kind of envision themselves at MIT. The Identity Inclusion Series is designed to connect those prospective students, that range from underrepresented minorities to veterans, LGBTQ plus members, and women that are going through the process, and affirm that this is the right choice for them. So we definitely wanted to highlight those particular stories. Be able to get them on campus was vital because during COVID, there was no opportunities for students to be on campus. And we know that that's the number one driver for people making their decisions, is to having that fit and that feel that this is going to be the best decision they're going to make over this next 2-year period. So I definitely wanted to highlight those two things that we did this past year.
That's great. Yeah, I definitely, the campus visits, which are often hard to fit in and to get going. So that's great that you're working on access on that front. But yeah, it usually has a pretty big impact in getting a feel for the program.
For sure. And I'll add that, a lot of students express appreciation for the intentionality of the events and how much it sparked or confirmed their interest in Sloan. So we definitely want to continue with those. I will say going into this next year, we're actually including some different populations, or I won't say different, invisible populations. So we're including partners as well as families. So being able to get that perspective as well, because we know going to business school is not a solo choice. So if people that are coming in with significant others or coming in with children, we definitely want to highlight that experience as well, because we know it's a challenge to go through the academic side by yourself, but being able to have support system through different avenues is going to be helpful in, just navigating this process.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that was definitely not an option that existed when I was applying. So that's a great step forward. Okay, so kind of switching gears and thinking more about the MBA application itself. I figure we could go into some of the key aspects of it and get your take on how you best position your application. So this is for all the listeners that are gearing up to apply to business schools. So I think one area that I've always had lengthy conversations around with folks is the letter of recommendation. So just curious how candidates should go about thinking about this, like who to get them from, like how they're evaluated, and just like how to go about even maybe making that ask. So what general advice would you have on the letter of recommendation?
So the general advice I would give is to plan enough time to connect with your recommender, who will provide a meaningful and detailed recommendation. Because we know when we have those admissions deadlines, people wait until the last minute to get everything in order. So if you already know which particular schools that may be within your top 3 or top 5, get those recommenders aware now, and then being able to, send them additional information as you're going through the process, depending on what schools you're going to. Because I think the common mistake that people make is, thinking their recommender is going to submit it, when they think they're going to. So being able to, 3 to 5 weeks to just kind of get everything in order and being able to submit that, because the letter of recommendation is the only thing that's out of the applicant's control. So giving yourself enough time to connect with your recommender, as well as being able to find somebody that can speak to your strengths, but also your career trajectory, is going to be helpful in that process.
Got it. So would you say, for example, like going like the title of the person matters? Like how much would you weigh that versus how well they know you, let's say?
I wouldn't say the title necessarily matters. It's more so how well they know you and how well they can speak to your professional aptitude, but also your academic capabilities. So we definitely encourage, if possible, to get your direct supervisor or an immediate past supervisor that can speak to those strengths, because they know you really well because you're directly reporting to them, or being able to get a professional mentor that can speak to your strengths as well, that you have remained in contact with over, a certain amount of time, but also somebody that can speak to your strength within the last 2 to 3 years. Because we know that, with the 2 to 3 year period, a lot can change in that time. But being able to have somebody that can speak to your strengths, that talks about, how well you handle adversity, how well you lead others, how do you work in a team. So being able to have somebody that can speak to those strengths versus having a title, because the title is not factored into the decision making. It's more so like, what does your recommender say about you and what kind of character you have?
Got it. Cool. Okay, let's switch to the interview, which I know is usually one, it's like usually a sense of accomplishment that you're like, all right, I'm at the stage now where I'm doing an interview, but then it brings its own kind of butterflies and pressure in that kind of real time nature of it. So curious, I guess at one level first, just to learn how are interviews conducted at MIT Sloan? Is it like current students or kind of generally what are the things you're probing for there? And then just any advice you want to share on what you see as successful interviews and maybe common mistakes.
Gotcha. So our interview process, so it kind of goes like this. So if you're invited for an interview, you will meet one-on-one with a member of our admissions committee. So we do not have students or alumni part of our interview process. We conduct behavioral interviews in which we'll ask you to provide specific examples of your personal and professional behavior. The interview is designed to be conversational. So we don't want to like have students coming in thinking that it's, more than what it truly is, because it can be very intimidating. So we're very upfront about that. We encourage students to be authentic in this process because we know that their stories and their experience will help showcase how unique they truly are. So that's my advice to students is truly being authentic, being relaxed in the interview, because a lot of times people are not truly relaxed. They're, trying to give us a perfect answer versus giving us an honest example or honest answer. So being able to have that particular, relaxed environment, but also being in a quiet environment as well, because I can't tell you how many stories we've heard of students being in a loud environment or being distracted in an interview. So being able to allocate, 30 minutes of just quiet time within a space within your office space or in a, quiet environment, we definitely want to make sure that you're, not distracted during this time and truly focus on that 30 minutes and being able to answer questions to the best of your ability.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So many things, especially when you're doing things remotely, it's like the tech setup, the connection, like you said, background noise, these sort of things you're not even thinking about often until maybe right when you're logging in. So that's a good call out that factors.
Yeah, and another piece of advice I will say as well is like when you know what time your interview will be, and you may have family members or friends that may be communicating with you at a certain time of day, let them know ahead of time. Say, hey, I'm interviewing from X time to X time. I just would encourage you to refrain from messaging me or calling me at this particular time unless it's an emergency, because that does go along with you being focused in that particular 30-minute time slot.
Got it. Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, so now kind of turning to certain situations that applicants may find themselves in. So one is just the low undergrad GPA. I know, like, if you're in that position, you feel like, well, what can I do about it now that's behind me? Yep. So when you're in that situation, how do you build confidence, or how do you think about how you address that when you're applying?
Yeah, so I will say we want to see their undergraduate GPA, but we understand that it's just one component of the application. And we also know that we'll review it alongside other coursework that you've completed. So we do not have a minimum GPA requirement for admission. However, we understand that there's other components that we'll look at. So work experience is one of those, the letter of recommendation, but also looking at their cover letter and being able to look at their career trajectory and why an MBA. So a lot of times students are caught up in the GPA, and that's something that they can't fix, like you said. So we'll look at it, in other areas. So we don't really, we're not as concerned about what happened when you were between the ages of 18 and 22. We want to see what you're doing now in your career, what type of career trajectory you're on, and being able to kind of make sure that this is a right fit for you. So I wouldn't get tied up in, grades or anything like that, but more so being able to articulate why business school is a right fit for you, or particularly why Sloan is a good fit for you.
Got you. I'm curious too, then, on the work experience front, what if you're kind of earlier in your career, you don't have as much as average? So on that front, I'm curious, what is a typical range, would you say, for MIT Sloan in terms of work experience? And I guess when someone is able to gain admittance when they're, let's say, less than that, what do you think stands out about those applicants?
Yeah, so at Sloan, the minimum requirement we look for at work experience is 2 years, but it does range up until 9 years. So on average, this past class, there were about 5 years of work experience. So prospective students should use their best judgment in choosing the best time to pursue an MBA. So we've admitted students that had 2 years of experience. We've had declined students that have 2 years of experience. So just being mindful of like when you're looking to apply, and like I said before, being able to truly articulate why an MBA. It doesn't matter how long you've been working, but more so why now and how will this help you in your career trajectory. We do not prefer any specific work or industry experience, so it doesn't matter which kind of background you're coming from. Instead, we want to see that you've been successful at whatever you're currently doing or what you've previously been doing. So experiences at small organizations, startups, big corporations can all provide distinct, valuable, and rich experiences. So we have a very, diverse class in terms of not only racial diversity, but also, geographic diversity and industry experience. So being able to have those wide range of perspectives is only going to help you in the classroom, and also being able to articulate and lead different classroom discussions.
Got it. Very cool. And then kind of last part for this section is just thinking about the kind of the tests that you might take, the standardized tests as part of your application. There's just so many options and ways to go for students these days. Of course, there's not doing the standardized test for many programs. There's GMAT, but then increasingly we're seeing students study for the GRE and apply to MBA programs, the GRE. And then on top of that, both GRE and GMAT have new formats coming out, these like shorter GRE, GMAT focus edition. So just curious to get your take on that, if there's any certain preferences MIT has, or just ways that a student might think about one or the other option.
Yeah, so we accept either or tests, so GMAT or GRE. And I just want students to be aware that the GMAT and GRE are components of the application process and play an important role in our evaluation process. But similar to the GPA, it's just one component. So it's not something that's going to be weighted heavily over something else. It just helps us evaluate academic success and potential. If you do not score high enough on the GMAT or GRE, we'll look for evidence of success in your transcripts, as well as in your quantitative professional experience. So there's a wide range of things we're going to look at to be able to make sure that we're making the best decision possible. With the new GMAT as well as GRE, we will accept those scores as well. So if you're looking to take the newer test versus the old test, we'll accept either one as well. So making sure that you're taking the test that you're most comfortable with, and being able to submit that score with your application by the application deadline.
Got it. Just curious if you've seen any interesting trends there in terms of applicants. I imagine GMAT is the predominant test that's used, but are you seeing more GRE applicants, or just any interesting trends there?
So surprisingly, GRE was actually more popular this past year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then for GMAT, one thing we've noticed in terms of like students, once they get in the classroom space, the verbal plays a huge role once they become a student because of the communication aspect. So more people with higher verbal scores, they're doing well in the communications class, but also being able to, lead, workshops, or being able to articulate things within the classroom space. So verbal is a very underrated aspect of the GMAT, but it's very useful once you're going through the process of actually being a student. So a lot of people are caught up in I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I'm curious, does that then factor in a bit on the admissions process? Do you pay extra attention now on the verbal, kind of knowing that, or?
Yeah, so we pay attention to both, so the quant and the verbal, so it's a combined score. But knowing that the verbal is going to play a huge role, we'll be able to see that within the interview, as well as once they are, selected and being able to enroll in the class, that the verbal is going to play a huge role. So for those of you that may not be as strong in the verbal, feel free to take some additional prep on that, because it's going to help you in business school.
That's great. I hadn't heard this insight, so that's super helpful, Tim. Okay, so one other area I'm interested is kind of a holistic one on the application process. What do you see as kind of the most overvalued and then maybe the most undervalued parts of the application?
Yeah, so I'll say the most overvalued part of the application are the GMAT and GRE test scores. So many people are tied up into like having the perfect score or meeting this particular profile versus having other areas of the application make up the gaps. So I think that was super overvalued within my first year. So like a lot of students are concerned about it, but being able to kind of articulate other areas of the application that are really strong. And I think an area that was undervalued was the letter recommendation. So being able to get somebody that can truly speak to your professional aptitude, somebody that truly knows you, but also realizing that's the only thing that's out of your control. So making sure that you give them enough time to submit that letter recommendation.
Got you. Yeah, it's always such a tricky balance on how you make that ask and keep up with folks. But yeah, it there could be a lot of variability in the quality you get based on how that plays out. So I agree on that. Cool. Okay, so now let's go kind of shifting gears, still kind of the application process, but a big mystery often for applicants is kind of what happens once they hit submit on their application. Like what is going on in the admissions offices? Like how is their application read? What are all the steps that it goes through before a decision is made? So obviously, I know there's like kind of a secret sauce in this, and maybe some things that you don't detail it in depth. But it would be interesting to get a little peek inside of what is that process like? Like if you could walk us through how you generally process an application.
Yeah, so our admissions committee is comprised of professional staff members within the MIT community. So we have some admission staff members, some contract readers, as well as some people within our program office that read our applications. So they review it, and then they will basically conduct the interview after that particular point if you're selected for an interview. Like I mentioned before, current students are not involved in our process at all. So I will say one unique thing about the review process is we do not start reading until the day after the application deadline. So let's say, for example, you're applying round one and you're trying to think, okay, if I apply earlier, I kind of get, opportunity to be read earlier. So it doesn't work that way. So we look at the day after the application deadline to read all those applications. It usually takes about, I would say, depending on the application volume, about 3 to 5 weeks to review all of the applications. All of our applications are read by our admissions committee. So we do not, have a screening process. We review everybody's application. Then we will go to admissions committee, being able to determine, which students will be selected for an interview. Then we do the interview process, which takes about a month because we have a whole bunch of scheduling we have to do with that. Then once interviews are conducted, we'll release our decisions sometime about 2 months after. So let's say, for example, round one is in September. You will go through the reading process for that particular 3 to 5 weeks. Then interviews will be that next month, and then decision will be released sometime in December. So it's about a 2-month window where we're doing all of this depending on our application volume. So our application deadlines actually will be released sometime in July. So students will be able to see what the timeline is to be able to make sure that they're going to have the most ready application. And just we're looking for different, attributes in the application as well. So it's not like one thing we're looking for. So it's a range of competencies that we're looking for. So, how well you work in a team, how you solve problems, how you communicate change and gain buy-in. And they're assessed both within the written application and the interview. So we make a comprehensive decision, for students that are coming in for our MBA program.
Got you. So yeah, so like one thing I picked up there too is that first of all, you wait to read them all once they're all in. And then it sounds like you go through all the applications before kind of like, all right, these are the ones, let's say, to interview and go forward. So it's kind of, you go through everything. It's not like read this, right? Oh, yeah, this person, let's get them in right now, right? You're going through the whole pool and getting a sense. And yeah, how is, I just, to me, it seems daunting, like to think of how many applications would be in there and what is that meeting like? Like, what is there kind of a rubric or like, I'm curious to learn a little bit more on how you're able to process so many things.
Yeah, so there's several meetings that happen over that particular time, and they're pretty lengthy meetings that happen with our admissions committee team. So on average, we review about 5,000 MBA applications, and we typically interview about 30% of our applicant pool and admit half of those who we interview. So it's a lengthy process of being able to have multi-AdCom meetings throughout the process to make sure that we're selecting the right students and being able to have advocates in the process as well. So when you're having a reader, that reader can advocate for you, also your interviewer as well. So being able to have multiple touch points with the process is only going to help the students, have the best result possible. I like to tell prospective students all the time that we are the Office of Admissions and not the Office of the Now. So we are trying to find ways to admit you. Some ways are more clear than others. So when you're going through the application process, make sure that you have all of the questions answered so you're not leading your reader or your interviewer to ask questions post admissions review. So if you feel like your application is not strong enough now, being able to kind of go back and fill those gaps to make sure that, there's no questions or no stones left unturned.
Got you. I'm curious then on the reading experience, is that is there usually just one reader that's going in depth, and then like how much time would you say they're spending with your application?
Yeah, so we have readers per like industry. So we have some contract readers that have, industry experience. We're also having our program office being able to help with reading as well. I actually began the reading process this past fall, and it's very lengthy, but very comprehensive, and it's very intentional with how we read our applications. So I will say, on average, reading one application may take about 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just me. With me being newer last year, I wanted to make sure I was precise in my reviewing. But we're looking at a multitude of things, so we want to make sure that we're not missing anything through the application, and then being able to provide a recommendation to the committee to move forward with an interview, or being able to kind of discuss different things that we may not have felt comfortable with within the application, but just kind of want to have a conversation about. So there's different touch points. We have different leads as we're going through the process as well. So we may lead on somebody that, has that industry experience within, finance, to be able to talk about what you're truly looking for within the first, 3 years of your career, and how it's going to be helpful in terms of career trajectory. So it's a lot of touch points, and it's very intentional with how we review. And I definitely appreciated that going through my first year, because coming from undergraduate admissions, it was more so quant heavy in terms of like looking at GPAs and test scores. Here it's more subjective, and being able to kind of find those reasonings for why somebody will be a good fit for our program.
That's great. I mean, that's an impressive process across 5,000 applications. So it is it's a tricky problem, getting through all that, but then giving the time and attention to each story. And also that's a great balance. It sounds like you all are striking. So an area that I was curious to get into here is, when you're thinking about the different stakeholders in terms of who's interested in kind of the class makeup and all. And a particular area I'm interested in is in employers. So, that's where MBA graduates are going when they're graduating from the program. And I imagine, MIT Sloan has a good ear to kind of how industries are evolving, kind of what skills and attributes employers are valuing and looking for. So just curious to hear a bit on maybe like what you're seeing there in the employer space, and then if that gets factored in. It sounds like a little bit you've already been sharing that you have these kind of readers that are experts in the industry, but just curious to hear a bit about that, what you're seeing from industry and kind of how it is factored in to your admission process.
So with our stakeholders, we all have a common set of goals to ensure that prospective applicants are academically ready for the curriculum at MIT, but also the action learning that may take place while you're in the program as well. So we're making sure that as you're going through the process, we have those connection points with our program office, but also maybe within our career development office to talk about what's going on within the industry. I will talk about more recently, I know with the tech layoffs that happened, we were able to factor that into our decision, being able to extend one of our application deadlines to make sure that we were accommodating those students. So there's a lot of things that we factor into the review process, but I think just having a common set of goals and what we're truly looking for in terms of, the fit, but also students that are going to come in and be ready for the academic curriculum is what we're truly looking for.
Got you. Very cool. Okay, so let's shift gears again. This is going to be a little game, I guess, of kind of myth versus reality, where I'm going to share kind of common things that we hear from folks going through the admissions process, common beliefs that applicants often have. And just curious, is it real? Is it not? And then, any color you can kind of share on that front. Okay. So, all right, let's go into a few of these statements. So first one is fact or fiction, or myth or reality. You have the best chance of getting in if you apply in round one.
So that is fiction, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And did you want me to go into depth about why?
Yeah. Just curious.
So the reason I would say it's fiction is because, of course, round one does have more seats available, and you would think in theory that it increases my chances. But students are still accepted in round two, and some students are also accepted in round three. So there's a multitude of rounds that we have to make sure that we are rounding out our class. But it's not, one round or the other percentages are higher. It just really depends on when you're most ready to apply. And that's why I say it's a fiction, because, we have people that are admitted for round two that have, higher probability because of the fact they have a whole nother semester or 5 months to be able to increase their application with new test scores or being able to potentially get a promotion at their job. So there's a wide range of things that can happen between round 1 and round 2.
That's a really good point. We tend to think we're just like static, like the same, but that you might make it up with things that you've progressed on in that time. All right. So fact or fiction, you won't get any scholarships unless you apply in round 1 or 2.
So I was in between on this one, but I'll say fiction because I know specific examples of people that applied round 3 this past year that actually received fellowships. So fellowships, we offer, Dean's fellowships, which are merit-based, but also there's fellowships that our alumni give as well on behalf of like discretionary funds. So being able to have students that meet particular requirements, they can still receive fellowships in round 3. But I wouldn't encourage applying for round 3 if you're looking for fellowships because of just how much money may not be available. So applying round 1 and round 2 does give you a higher chance, but it doesn't truly eliminate you in round 3 if you wait until that particular point.
Got it. Okay. Another area I think that's interesting is the wait list. So here's one. I'm going to reword this a bit to make it a little more interesting. It's very hard to get off the wait list. Fact or fiction?
So I would say that's fiction. And the reason I say it's fiction is because it depends on when you were placed on the wait list.
Okay.
If you were placed on, because I know we have 3 rounds. So if you're placed on the wait list in round 1, you have way more opportunity to be able to, add more information to your application or just give us updates that may have happened. So with our wait list, if you're waitlisted in round 1, you're automatically considered for round 2. Same thing with round 3 if you're still on that wait list for round 2. So there's multiple ways you can get pulled off the wait list. The wait list, we tell people to wait until, as long as you feel like you are, still looking to go to the school for that particular year, because you never know what could happen. We may be pulling some people off the wait list in July because, things happen, but just kind of being ready for when that call comes to be pulled off the wait list and being ready to enroll in that particular semester. So I would definitely say it's fiction.
Got you. Okay. This next one's a good one for you coming from MIT Sloan. Fact or fiction, candidates with no quantitative or analytical background won't get into business school.
That is also fiction. So I think I'm on a fiction roll right now. But I would say that's fiction because we have people from different industries that are coming in. And like I mentioned before, about 55% of our students are coming in from non-STEM backgrounds. So you don't necessarily have to have that quantitative or analytic background. Of course, it does help, but it's not a requirement for our program because it is so interdisciplinary.
Got you. Okay. We kind of talked about this a little, but curious to ask you point blank, the GMAT is preferable to the GRE, fact or fiction?
So I would say that's fiction. So we don't have a preference on which test you take. So whichever one you feel comfortable with. Like I mentioned, I think more people took the GRE this past year. So it's definitely fiction. GMAT is more so focused on like the management aspect, but GRE is a little bit more flexible because you can use that for a multitude of graduate programs. So a lot of people go that route just in case business is not their top choice for graduate school. They can go different routes with that.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, I think we might have a lot of fiction here, but it's good. It's good to get some of the story behind some of this stuff because it's definitely stuff we hear.
Yes.
So I know the score is not the main thing that's factored. So this is more about the range. So candidates have to score within the 80 percentile of the median standardized score. So I guess on either side to get into the MBA program. So like fact or fiction that you have to at least be within a certain range to be considered for these.
So I would say that's fiction as well. Of course, it does help being in the higher ranges because you're a more competitive applicant. Yeah. But we have students that fall below that range, but also have strengths in other areas. So let's say if you fall below the 80 percentile, you have a very strong work experience, or you have a very strong recommendation letter that can be factored in. We'll look at that. So I wouldn't get too tied up in the test scores because there's other areas that we look for in the application to make sure that you are ready for the curriculum that you're going to experience.
Got you. Okay, now I don't know if MIT has optional essays in here, so we can make of this what you will, but the fact or fiction that you should always write the optional essay or answer optional questions on an application?
So this is going to be the undergraduate admissions counselor in me, and I'm going to say fact.
All right, we got a fact.
We got a fact. So I will say fact for this one because you want to utilize all of the real estate possible in the application. So you don't want to leave anything like blank because it could be your opportunity to be able to share some more context. So the optional essay we do have on our application, more so sharing more about your upbringing and your background. So being able to utilize that space is only going to give us a full picture of who you are as an applicant. So I definitely would say fact. If you see optional, do it because it's only going to help you in the long run anyway. And it won't be like a weighted factor. It's just additional context for your application.
Yep, that makes sense. And good to get a fact in there. All right, this one's an interesting one. If you don't get into a top 20 school, it's not worth getting an MBA. Fact or fiction?
Ooh, I will say fiction on that because there are a lot of great business schools that are, not in the top 20 that fit the needs of the prospective student. So some students may be looking for programs that are a little bit more flexible in terms of maybe being online or maybe weekend programs. So being able to look at what best fits you, versus like a ranking is only going to help you because yes, it does help to have the ranking as you're going through the recruiting process for consulting or going through internships. But it's really about what you're looking for in terms of flexibility. Because we know some people may have, families that they're trying to, you raise and things of that particular nature. So just finding what's best fit for you versus, looking at a ranking.
Got it. All right. This one's about ROI of the MBA. I think that it's often a debated topic. I know a lot of people are like, oh, what are MBAs doing all day? They're having their fun and all. I've heard all sorts of things thrown out there. So I'm curious though, when it comes down to the ROI of like your, let's say, increase in earnings and all over time. So here's the statement: the MBA ROI is not as strong in a digital economy. So kind of where we're at in 2023 and all. Fact or fiction that maybe the ROI is not what it used to be?
I would say fiction on that. And I will give a specific example. So I actually interacted with one of our alums in South Africa last month. So being able to have that conversation and talking about like her pivot and being able to look at multiple things that she was able to do with her MBA, but not only, connecting with Sloan alums, but also other MBA alums that she's going through the career process. So being able to pivot jobs from year to year or every 5 years, it does help you having that MBA because there's a lot of flexibility in what you can really do with it. So I will say the return on investment is strong because of just the flexibility of the degree.
Gotcha. That's great to hear. Okay, so now we're gonna go into another game, rapid fire round. I always find these hard, so hopefully you're better at these than I am.
Okay.
I'll give you a phrase, and then for each one, respond with just one or two words, and basically, as fast as you can. So, embodying the rapid fire.
Okay.
So, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go for it. All right, first one, the perfect applicant.
Honest and aware.
All right. The feeling of getting accepted into your dream program.
Reassurance.
The GMAT.
Ooh, it's like 4 words. An additional data point.
I like that one. All right. Admission myths.
Fluid. Change from year to year.
Yeah. All right. The top 20.
Collaborative.
Ooh. Cool. MIT Sloan.
Innovation.
That's a good one. Cool. I am curious from that, kind of going off script a bit. The top 20, you said collaboration. So now I'm just very or collaborative, like very curious there. Is that mean you're collaborating a lot with other folks in in other programs, or?
Yeah, we are. So I know we have a lot of our because HBS is in the same city, so we do a lot of collaboration with them. but also other schools within the Northeast. We do a lot of programming together to make sure that we're reaching enough audiences. I know we actually just came back from Africa together. So 7 schools went to Africa to be able to increase the pipeline of African students coming to American business school. So that was a very fun trip. We went in looking to compete, and then by the end, we were just extremely collaborative about what we can take from each school to make sure that we're going to create more access for African citizens. So that was pretty cool and life-changing experience.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And yeah, it's just something that as an applicant or as an MBA, even like hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, you probably are kind of in the same rooms often, and it's great that it takes on that spirit as you spend time together. So cool. Well, we're getting close to wrapping up. So I think I did want to give you an opportunity on one thing, which is kind of before we wrap up. Is there anything else that you wanted to share or go into that maybe we didn't cover in the topics today? Just anything you want to plug there?
I can plug 2 things actually. So I will plug that, we are bringing back some, major events that we did in the past pre-COVID. So our Sloan on the Road events will actually take place this summer as well. They're actually starting in Paris on July 10th. Then there will be international components as well as domestic. So please see our admissions event page for more details and registration links. And also we do plan to bring back our identity inclusion focus on campus visit days this fall. So also be on the lookout for those as well, to be able to kind of sit in on the class and interact with our current students.
Got you. And I imagine those are probably the best ways for folks to get in touch, but any other ways you would suggest if someone wants to talk with you or the admissions committee?
Yeah, so they can reach out to us via email at mbaadmissions.mitsloan@mit.edu, or they can email me directly at terrellw@mit.edu.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Terrell. This is a blast getting to know you, MIT Sloan, and just talking about kind of the current state of the MBA and all. So I want to thank everyone for listening to Gradtalk MBA podcast. You can find us at Gradtalk on TikTok. This will be on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. So appreciate your time again, Terrell, and look forward to doing more of these going forward.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Gradtalk MBA by Magoosh. If you enjoyed this episode, please like or subscribe this podcast wherever you're listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.